It's working, yes.
My name is Nisar Shah. I'm a freelance journalist. Can I ask the panelists about the NATO? Is it high time that NATO should be abolished? Because a lot of people think that this is a terrorist organization. And, particularly Peter Gilchrist, actually, I'm very interested to his comments, because 42 countries have descended on the poorest country in the world, in Afghanistan. They have been there for 8 years, they haven't got no result, and I think this is a terrorist organization, this should be abolished. Now, NATO is a relic of the past. Now, the Cold War is over, Warsaw Pact is abolished, demolished, or whatever you call it, abandoned. All the East European countries have joined the EU, they are the bedfellows of the EU, France, Germany, England. Now, what my question is actually, be patient with Mr. Mehta, this is a debate. Now, the problem actually with the Western countries is that they still think they are imperialist power and they will succeed, they will not succeed. In Afghanistan, Britain has got a lot of experience. They were defeated twice in the 1882 and 1891. Twice they were defeated by the Afghans. Afghans are not people actually to give up their fight. They will fight to the end. How long, Mr. Christ, are you going to stay in Afghanistan? There should be an end of it. People are being killing each other on both sides. And how many people are how many people have been killed in Afghanistan? Nobody actually knows the number. There are millions. Now, when we hear about the British soldiers being killed, they say, BBC said that so and so is killed and their family is informed. What about the Afghans who have been killing, who's been killed, civilians every day by drone bombs? So thousands. So you are actually imperialist. You should get out of Afghanistan quickly and possibly as quickly as you can do. Can you answer my question properly? This is a question about the NATO. You should answer that question that you should abolish. NATO should be a terrorist organization.
I heard the question. I'm not sure I'm going to
The lady over there.
Well, I'm not about the lady, but in this instance, I've got to speak sooner, so I take no offence. Mine is a question inspired by an offhand comment made by Peter Gilchrist, which I hope I misheard, but I don't think I did. He said that we used to have a much better colonial service. Now, does the panel believe that, in light of remarks made about a year ago by the likes of Sherrod Kuiper-Coles, who was, I think he might still be the envoy, the British envoy to Afghanistan, that we should be prepared to be in Afghanistan for up to, and possibly more than 40 years, does the panel believe that we are involved in another colonial occupation, and by extension, in Iraq and other countries that we've invaded, is that the case as well?
Okay, question about that lady about
Media.
media. Yeah, that's okay. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah, it was,
Now,
they mostly exploit the mistakes made by the coalition forces and Afghan government inside Afghanistan. They would give examples of civilian casualties, they would have footage of destruction or house searches or personal searches or people taken into custody and being sent to Baghdad prison or Guantanamo, or some of them are very elderly people like 90 years old and some of them are teenagers. So they exploit these mistakes, but when they commit any mistake, when they kill civilians in their own suicide bombing, they don't mention that. They just keep quiet about that because so many civilians have been killed and injured in their suicide bombings in many parts of the country, but they don't talk about that. They just focus mainly on mistakes made by the coalition forces. And another point that I wanted to mention here is the regional dimension of the Afghan conflict. We all talked about the international presence inside Afghanistan, but we didn't talk enough about the regional dimension of the conflict. There's a struggle for influence in Afghanistan by regional countries. Pakistan wants more influence in Afghanistan. Iran wants the same. India is trying to do the same. And Iran is not happy with the presence of foreign troops next door. So there's a lack of trust. There's a regional competition between all these neighboring countries. And if you remember in the 90s, early 90s, all these neighboring countries were supporting one armed group against the other, so which resulted in a civilian war inside the country. So there's a regional dimension to the Afghan conflict too. It's not only international. There's a regional dimension.
Thanks.
Can I
Michael,
just add
Peter, you want to come in as well?
I'll let Michael.
Michael.
Can I just add something to this question of, I suppose, the social campaign on behalf of either the coalition or the Taliban? I've been reading something about this recently, and there was one survey by Psychological Operations, American Psychological Operations, which reckoned that on one occasion the Taliban were able to film an attack, or at least to report an attack within 26 minutes of the attack taking place. Now, the United States has always had the army has always had this very ambivalent relationship with internet sites and Twitter. And so they finally, after about 4 or 5 years, they finally allowed some of their members in the military to use Facebook sites, but not MySpace sites. Some they do accept and some they do not accept. But they've just started issuing, I think, the commanding officers of some of their forces in Wardak province with Twitter, so they can tell how many Taliban they've killed just every 10 minutes.
Peter and then Bruce.
You did mishear me.
I'm glad.
Because what I said is it's difficult to recruit people who have the same kind of expeditionary nature as we had in the colonial service. So we find it difficult to recruit civilians to go and do the job, which really partially answers Anne's question. The military would prefer not to be doing the aid. The aid should be being done by civilians. And it's getting civilians to do that aid that is actually the trick we have to pull in the near future. So there is that. Frank, a lot of things that you said I would disagree with. The destruction we're talking about was caused between the 1974, when the king was deposed. The majority of the destruction was done between 79 and 89. Then a massive amount was done in the civil war. And I'll turn to an expert on this, but if you go and have a look at Kabul, you can see what they managed to do themselves. What we're trying to repair is not stuff that we have bombed since then, because there's been relatively little bombing since then in relation to that time. So most of the destruction, all irrigation and so on, was destroyed by the Soviets as part of their punishment mechanisms. And that's what we're trying to do. I wasn't quite sure whether I would dignify your question with a comment, but I will do my best, which is that NATO has provided the longest period of peace that this country has had for many years. By peace, I mean there have been no proper nation-on-nation wars while NATO has been in existence. The interesting thing is that a large number of the ex-Warsaw Pact countries who have joined the EU have also joined NATO for the purposes that NATO gives them that form of collective security.
Thanks, Peter. No, for
Against what?
Excuse me, NATO, in my opinion, should have dissolved itself when the threat was set up for, dissolved itself. All these years of peace, that's a very European perspective. What happened in the Cold War is that both sides fought their wars out in third world countries, and about 25 million people died in the war since 1945, which was the result of the superpower conflict. There's nothing in the UN Charter against, in fact it supports the idea of regional arrangements. But this is not a regional arrangement. NATO operates quite independently of the UN when it wants to. I think it should be abolished or reset up as a proper regional arrangement, which would be quite a different kettle of fish.
Thank you very much. Lindsay, and then I'm going to take another 4 questions, and that could be our last round. 8:45, yeah. That could be our last. Lindsay, please.
Can I just say that I don't believe that you say there's no nation-on-nation war. When we have Vietnam, for example, where America did invade it, 2 million people. 2 million people died of Vietnamese. Iran. You go through it, it's simply not true. What has been done with NATO is it went from being a North Atlantic Treaty Organisation to operating, out of area, it doesn't really describe it in South Asia. There is no purpose to it apart from the military purpose. And Bruce is right, when the Warsaw Pact is so to NATO increasingly it's been used to circumvent UN resolutions, and this is what happened in Kosovo, and it's what happened again, it's what's happened again in Afghanistan. And I think it should be